Kerry Jones.
Thanks for joining me, Tony. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Well, we did arrange to do something, I think about a year ago, maybe more than a year ago. I met you in a pub down in Ogmore.
The Watermill.
The Watermill, that's it. Because you're from that neck of the woods, aren't you?
Yes, I live at Pencoed, which is not far from Bridgend. 14 miles west of Cardiff, I would say, on the map.
Are you originally from that area?
No, my start in life has been a bit of a comical one, really, in that my mother was from Derry in Northern Ireland, and my father was from Bridgend, and he was out there stationed in the RAF before the war, and two girls turned up in the family first, and then I turned up. And I was born in a little village called Muff, two F's, in Donegal, and my mother was under pressure from my father to come over to where he was then stationed in Cardington in Bedfordshire, because he'd put down for a married quarters house, and unless she was there, we couldn't have it. So I was whisked from Ireland on the ferry, very young baby, over to Cardington in Bedfordshire. So yes, that was the start of it all, really.
Donegal is a beautiful place. I've been there once or twice. It's not far from where I am now in Sligo, actually. Do you ever come over?
It is. Yes, it's. I still go over to Derry. We got cousins around the city, and I got a cousin out at Culmore Point, which is on the mouth of the Foyle, which we'll come to a bit later. Yes, and I've been to Buncrana and Mulvale, and right up to Malin Head, where I stood with my two sisters. Anne's gone now, sadly, and we watched dolphins from the shore, which we were quite surprised to see.
Well, the season has started over here. Have you actually been out over there?
No, we've had a funny thing. Here in Wales, we've had a number of water authorities telling us what to do. I mean, where I am, the Morgan's River Board, then, NRA, Welsh Water, and they decided in their wisdom to change it from the 1st of March, which was the opening day, which was a great opening day, because out on the river with my couple of chums, we'd all stick a daffodil on for St. David's Day, and the hunt was out, which was marvellous to see that spectacle. Whether you like hunting or not doesn't come into it. The fact that it was a spectacle and they were out, and it was a wonderful day. And then they changed it to the 3rd of March. Never quite understood why a couple of issues. But they did, to be fair, give us an extra 2 weeks at the end of the season, which we were able to fish for sea trout, which is very important in Wales, as you know. No, they've got this little anomaly in a lot of the clubs where things change, and it's difficult for a visiting angler, but of course nowadays, where we used to have to look, in the local trout and salmon, or just look in the post office, see what was going on, where you could get your rod license then. Now everything's online, and so you can find anything out, but it does make it confusing. The lakes I fished around here in Wales were mostly Tallaslyn, right up the top there, and then over the border into England, and Blagdon was my favourite, and Chew. So, I've fished lots of other still waters in Wales, but I think you can concentrate on one style of fishing, which I've never done. I've been a proper sea game course fisherman, still the same. Not much sea fishing now, because where we are, we don't get a lot of catches. I try to catch a whiting in the winter, but seldom do anymore.
I've noticed from your web page, your Facebook page rather, you're an all-rounder. You can fish for maybe roach one day, and then a barbel, or out with your fly rod another day. And that is something which I come across from your presence on social media. Am I right in saying you started the Crabtree Society?
Yes, that's something which I was a secretary here in Bridgend for a long time on the River Ogmore, and as secretary, you get to know a lot of people, and they become friends. And a couple of guys said to me one day, "Oh, we're going over to fish in Blagdon. Do you want to come with us?" And I went. Didn't generally fish with other people, maybe one or two mates, but this was a gang of about 7 or 8, and we stayed in a pub, which is always a pleasure. And when I came back, I thought, well, that was a great day out, and perhaps I should do something similar. So I had about 6 pals then that I could jump on and say, "Come on, we're going to go on a fishing day." That went up to about 18. I was sending out letters called the Crabtree Society, and sending them in the post, and we meet in the pub once every couple of months. It was great. We went all over the place, even to Ireland, fishing for salmon, coarse fish, and out in the sea. So we had a minibus and a trailer behind us. But the Crabtree Society has all come from the book Mr. Crabtree Goes Fishing, which is Bernard Venables. When I was born in 1950, through the 50s and 60s, this is what was captivating young boys' imagination. What, can we go fishing? Well, we were all reading comics, aren't we? Beano, Dandy, Hotspur, you name them. But of course, this book came out and it was like a comic. It was pictures of Mr. Crabtree and his son Peter, and they were fishing monthly for different types of fish, starting off in the winter, going into the spring, summer, and autumn. And this is what fueled me to start this up. I thought, well, we'll actually copy the trips in the book, and I said, right, next month this one. And the first trip, I made it into a mystery trip, which was quite strange. I said to these guys, right, we'll meet in these services on the M4. I'll give you an envelope. Just telling them where they're going fishing. And I had pre-warned them a little bit about where they should tackle, what they'd take and so forth. Anyway, we drove to a canal up near Marmalade outside Pontypool. Not much caught, but good bit of fun. And we went into the pub there, log fire, a pint, pie each, and they said, "Where are we going next?" And that was the birth of it. And that was right back 35 years ago.
Wow.
And it's grown somewhat.
And in recent years then, you set up the page on Facebook, yeah?
Yes, suddenly Facebook comes out and I thought, oh, this is quite good. Look up and down all the sort of things you want to look at, fly fishing, coarse fishing, whatever. And I thought, well, I could start a group on Facebook. And I thought for a while, I'd never take off, but I'll do it. And suddenly got people saying, oh, I'm interested. They all virtually had the same story. I had the book as a boy. I read it over and over and over. And what happened then was, I thought, well, it looks like we're going to get 100 people into this. It has now grown to 5,600, I think.
Yeah. They're
all over the place. The only thing is the love of the book, but not just the book. The man who wrote it, Bernard Venables, was a fantastic artist and made a few videos on TV. So
it'd be quite a day out now if 5,000 turned up in the services for the day out.
Escorted off the motorway like the football hooligans on the buses. The most we've had, I think, has been, I think about 38 have gone on one trip, and of course it takes some organising, but they're all of a certain age, shall we say, and they're all very well behaved.
But I remember the books. I don't remember because it started off, I think, if I remember right, in a newspaper. Was it the Mirror he was doing these storybooks?
Yes, the Daily Mirror, correct.
Yeah. And I remember there's a couple of books he had, Mr. Crabtree Goes Fishing and Mr. Crabtree Fishing with the Experts. And I think I've got 4 of them. I think there might have been a couple more. But I remember as a really young boy, like 12-year-old, in bed, and that was your YouTube then, wasn't it? It was like, there was nothing like that.
Yeah.
So it was like, you had the light on in your bedside table. I opened this book, and you'd be reading all the storyboards. And like you said, I remember then, Peter, wasn't it, the young boy? And he would start, like you said, saying, through the seasons. Now, this morning is the first day of spring, and we're going to be fishing for whatever, And,
that's right.
It drew the imagination, something which you don't really get now. But I remember then, because I had those books, I got passed them down, I did. Then I remember there was an evening in one of the hotels. I think it's round about near Tintern Abbey one time. It was a Welsh water presentation evening. And who was there was Bernard Venables. And it's the first time I'd met him. And I was kicking myself because I didn't know he was going to be there. And I would have loved to have taken one or maybe two of these books and had them to sign the books.
Yeah.
But yeah. I didn't get around to doing it, though.
Well, I got mine signed. I mean, the man is a hero of mine. I mean, at the moment, I'm in contact with his daughter, Hannah, and her daughter, Poppy. And I was fishing at Redmire, and my phone pinged, and I thought, oh, what's this? And a young lady said, oh, I'd like to join the Crabtree Society. I'm Bernard Venables' granddaughter. And I thought, oh, this is a wind-up from my mates. This can't be true. And eventually, I found that I should ring back. I was able to make contact with the family. So Hannah, the daughter, has been very supportive. And I met Bernard himself at Roadlands Game Fair. I was there with Paul Morgan of Cockabondy Books, invitation, because I was out of work at the time. And he said, you can give me a hand on this weekend show. And I said, okay. And he said, you'd be interested. And he said, you got Chris Yates turning up, and you got Bernard Venables signing books. So I said, God, I can't believe that. I said, of course, Chris Yates I knew of, but Bernard was the target for me. And I said, oh, wonderful. Memoirs it was, the book he wrote. So he turned up at the show with his wife, Eileen, and very, very small man, very well spoken, and said, oh, do you mind if I got somewhere to have my flask of tea and a sandwich? I said, oh, of course, Mr. Venables. I said, come through to our corporate dining area. And Paul Morgan's eyes opened wide and thought, what's he talking about? We haven't got one. And what happened was I opened the back of the bookstall, and we had a Luton van, we had a plastic table and chairs in there, and that's where we sat for half an hour before the book signing. So he signed my book, and I told him how wonderful the book was and how wonderful he was.
That was a great experience, I bet. What sort of fishing was he? He did all sorts of fishing as well, did he? He
did. And he actually had caught the biggest shark. It's in one of his books. And, and he was out on the Zambes. He went out with the whalers of the Azores. He fished all over the world, really. And when you go back to the 60s and look at travel as it was, you'd see planes jetting off to these islands. And there he was as an angling correspondent, But yes, he fished for all types of fish.
Yeah. Do you know what? I was looking at the storyboards before I called you, and there was one little sketch which I seen online, the one clip. It says, today, Peter, we're going to be fly fishing for trout. It's the best way to catch a fish or something, he said, I thought that'd go down well with the listeners, no?
Well, that's how I learned to fly fish. I was, a small boy, 10 or 11. My uncle was a ship's carpenter and was out in the Far East, as we called it then, on a ship. And he bought me a cane fly rod, which came in a book. It was a bamboo, obviously split bamboo. It came in a balsa wood box, which I know lots of people had at the time because they flooded the market. The handle turned around to be a spinning rod, and then back up for fly rod. The reversible handle, you turned it over, it's a spinning rod, put it back as a fly rod. Japanese, because I had one as a kid, it got worn out. Well, as you get as an adult, you can buy things you couldn't afford, really. So I bought one, unused, and it's still in the box, and I got upstairs. Interesting to look at. Very well made, Japanese there.
That's when you started fly fishing. And where would you have gone then in those early days?
Well, originally, I went down to the River Teifi, which is just below Paincoid, and we were fly fishing then when everybody else wasn't fly fishing, there's a couple of rods that you get given. But it was amazing because the wonderful thing about the fly fishing was I could go into the shop in Bridgend, and it was a saddler's, which is a wonderful smell of leather, shooting shop. All boys are fascinated by guns, and the fishing tackle, and very good fishing tackle. They'd have Hardies, makes that Millwards, Allcocks. the shop window, I used to peer in, and eventually, when I was on the milk round, I got enough money, tips one Christmas, to go in and buy for £4.05 a fly rod, 4 Shores of Liverpool, Palace number 5. Palace referred to the factory that they made them, 8 foot, quite a soft rod, but with that rod, I caught all sorts of fish. And my friend, Digraphus, he actually caught a pike, 7-pound pike on his. So they were used for all sorts of things, really. But I learned to fly fish from the book, went to that river, and then started to fish in the Ogmore, where I encountered the sea trout, a different proposition to the brown trout, which were mostly stocked in those days in the rivers here. Trying to protect wild trout has come later in life, when other organisations like the Wild Trout Trust comes in, and you know, they want to keep the brown trout that are in the rivers, not change their genetics, and so we end up now, don't we, with eggs which have been heat treated and triploids, and they can't breed with the fish. But when we put lots of stockfish in the Ogmore, I was a secretary there for years and years, we always wondered, well, do some of these get washed down to sea and come back as sea trout? I don't believe they do. I think the sea trout is a distinct species, but we did put a lot of trout in, and the trout fishing was good. Even though we didn't get much mayfly, we got wonderful hatches of large dark olives, and everything's changed now. It's not the same.
Do you fish it these days?
I don't fish it these days, in as much as there's too many people down there. The whole area's been built up. I like to go down to the bottom of the river and just look at the mullets, which I find difficult to catch. I caught a lot of sea trout on the river back in the day when we were night fishing. But no, I don't fish it so much now. I've not fished it for a few years, and I've switched over to the Teifi, which I've always fished as a boy, and that's where I feel I'm not really amongst lots of people. I like to go off on my own and just sit and observe, even watching an otter from time to time, taking a few trout.
I like the Teifi. I've only actually fished it. I think I fished it twice in all the years, maybe 3 times. But I find when fishing for sea trout, my first sea trout came from there actually, but I find it's easier to fish and you're more likely to catch fish. I think from what I've heard as well, there's more fish there than any of the other rivers. Not as big, but you know, I've had them like £1.50 sort of size. And it's exciting to have 3 or 4 of those in the evening, you know. But they don't get the big fish like, you know, the towie or even the neath to a certain extent. So you don't fish for sea trout much these days in the Ogmore even either, do you?
No, I don't. I was lucky enough to go through the good years where I was secretary that we fished at night, and the night fishing runs were very, very good. You don't need low water, but you don't want it too high. The introduction to me for sea trout fishing came from the Teifi. When I used to go down, I fished Kenneth Falls a lot as a boy, and in those days you could fish right in the falls with a worm, and obviously things were going wrong there, and it was banned just by the falls because the fish were just queuing up to go over. But running a worm below the bridge at Kenarth was fantastic for sea trout, and we did that for a very long time when it was allowed. It's still allowed now, worm fishing for sea trout, but people don't generally do it. When I was doing it, we had the added attraction of the 2 brothers that lived in the house below the bridge with coracles would come out, and if the river was high, you know, coloured and the fish were running, they'd go down past you in a coracle, and you'd have to pull your line in for them to go past. And down they went, and you'd see them get the odd fish. Didn't seem to catch a lot of fish, but they caught fish and they kept them, whether they were small or big. But I then met some people, older people than me. I was getting into my teens then, and suddenly I'd met a couple of guys from up north, and they were showing me their tackle, you know, with the flies they were using, and I thought, I'll have a go at that. So I tried it one night, and lo and behold, I did catch a sea trout. I didn't know what was going on because it's so dark, and the fish was out there somewhere. I brought it in, so it was banged on the head and taken to Auntie Maggie's farm where we stayed as a holiday family, where she was looking after my dad when he was small. He was brought up there on a farm at the age of 13. So that was the sea trout. fishing. And then, you progress then as you get older onto salmon fishing. And my first salmon was caught at Kenner on the worm, 7 pound. And I caught many more after that, but never one on the fly.
I suppose.
But I caught fish on the fly all over the place, Ireland and Scotland in particular.
I suppose Kennath, the falls there, is very bouldery and rocky, isn't it? I suppose it lends itself to fishing the worm, the trout and the worm down, then the fly, I guess, that sort of water, isn't it?
Yes, it's like any river. I mean, you look at the Cothie as well. They had an area they called the Rocks, and it was perfect for just running a worm. This isn't the old worming where you'd sit with a stick, throw it out and wait, and the fish is taking the hook right down. This would be, I never put the rod down when I was worming for fish. I hold it in my hand, and you hold a line in your hand. You can feel a bite, even the tiniest of bites. Yeah. You're then able to strike. And if you strike, you get a lip hooked fish. And if he gets off, he gets off. You wouldn't know what sort of fish it was. But no, the rain worm, different to the clear water upstream worm of, up north that they used to use, don't do that so much. But the rain worm has been an absolute classic in my life.
When you mentioned the coracle fisherman then, I wonder if anybody still does that. I remember a few years ago, I had a go, not fishing from one, but this guy I met, he'd made one and he wanted to try it out. So I had a go, actually, trying to, row one or move one across the water.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It takes some doing, I tell you. But I wonder if it's still done.
Well, it is. If you go down to Kilgarran, below Kennath, there are still these historical net agreements with families of people. And for whatever reason, salmon fishermen would like to see all netting stopped on river mouths, out to sea especially, because that's just one of the factors that is curtailing the catches, isn't it? Catches are dropping. But they still allowed to do it there. And I think they don't, I'm not sure they can keep salmon, but they can keep some sea trout. But, the folklore was of the coracles was they were used by poachers. I did meet a man in a pub once in Kilgarran. He came up in a small van and he was having a pint. And he said to me that he was a coracle fisherman. And he said, would I like to go out with him? And I said, well, but when would that be? And he said, well, in the night. I said, you go out in a coracle night netting? Yes, he said. And I said, I couldn't do it. I said, I can't swim. He said, I can't swim.
Yeah.
That's madness. But, they weren't all poachers, but they were used by poachers. Yeah, I've not been in one. My son went across the Teifi in one. It was a game fair there, and the chap said, anyone ever go? And he had to go. But you sit in it and you take your balance, and it's an upturned dustbin lid, really, so it goes anywhere it wants to. And the only way they paddle, nothing like a canoe, is just in the front, figure of 8, and over it goes in a fairly straight line. It's incredible. And when these guys were netting, because they were masters at it, they could spin round. And the nets then they were using weren't nylon, they were made out of hemp. So, yeah, and it has been consigned to the museum. You're right, they are all over the place. But they were on the Severn, they were on the River Dee in North Wales, they were on the Wye, slightly different makes, the way they were put together.
Yeah. But
mostly calico, goat skin.
They put like some sort of tar or something over it then, didn't they? It's black.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that in Corrib. We fished Corrib, and there was a guy there, youngster with his girlfriend. I was intrigued what they were doing. He pulled up with a big pot of black pitch, and he had the colours upside down, and he was covering them, and they were very thick, the pitch. And I said to him, what's the story with these? These are for racing. He said, I think it's 4 people in there and off they go. But of course, all about Lough Corrib, it's a massive lake, and it would take some time to get across there.
So you've done some fishing over here then, have you?
Yes. I was very lucky in that when I was a nipper, my dad was in the RAF, as I mentioned before, and he never fished. But thank God, God bless him, he took me fishing. And he took me just places where he probably thought I'd like to go. And one of the first was the mouth of Foyle, down at Culmore Point. There's a little lighthouse there. And I remember I'd only ever caught one fish on a rod before that, and it was a minnow in the River Ouse. I made some bread paste and popped it on the hook and looked at it. We had fish ponds in Carlington, but we were catching newts on worms and things like that. No hooks, just they were hanging on, they wouldn't let go. But there at the bottom of Kilmore, I obviously felt the bite of the worm, and there was an eel on the end, not particularly big, couple of pounds, but instead of reeling in, because I said to my dad, "Oh, I got an eel." And he said, "Oh, great," just looked at it. And I just ran back. I ran back up the beach and pulled it behind me. So that was the start of it all in Ireland. But no, I was taken by uncles to fish lakes for rudd. And when I became, able to drive and an adult, I was going back and forth, family holidays. And then I had a fishing holiday, and we decided, my friend and I, to go to Fermoy on the River Blackwater. But we fished for salmon, and invite came from Sportsmeal in Cardiff, which was a massive mail order company from trout and salmon.
Geez, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, from a little office, which he ran his practice. He was a solicitor.
That's
Mr.
right.
Tony Brodie Smith, and he would be upstairs, and you'd go in. He didn't encourage you to call to buy tackle, but so he had. If you bought a rod and reel salmon outfit, you'd have 3 weeks fishing on the River Blackwater at Mallow. So I tapped him up, so I was very friendly with him, and he said, "Oh, you can go anytime you want, really. Just let me know because it could be booked." So that's how we started, and we weren't spinning, but we were definitely fishing shrimp and fly fishing. And because there were quite a lot of fish in the river, you would be getting takes and you would catch a fish. Most days you'd catch fish, some days you didn't catch anything. But it's a great introduction into salmon fishing. So that was that one. And we went on to the Moy another time. Different thing altogether there in Ballinar, seeing how they fished the bubble and fly, which I couldn't get my head around. Yeah, when we came into the town to look at the river, drove up, parked outside the river, and opposite side was a fun fair, all lit up and going, and it was daytime. And I looked at the concrete bank. There was a boy playing a fish, and he brought it in, and it was jumping all over the place around his feet, and he was only about 10. And I realised he was a bit of a character himself, but no, that was it. And of course, then as I became an adult, we went off the rivers and started to fish the lochs and concentrated at my lake fishing in Ireland, loch fishing for trout, really. And we went really during the mayfly season because the mayfly hatches were prolific, and I've never seen anything like it. I made the mayfly box with painted it green, little hole in the top to catch them, the net, put them in, and then fish them live, dapping. And I bought a Loch Marie hologlass dapping rod, 15 foot, quite heavy, but of course when you sat down, it didn't make much difference.
Right.
And we fished that year after year. It was absolutely fantastic. And I long to go back, to be honest with you.
If you're enjoying this podcast and want to listen to more, please consider becoming a patron, where you will get weekly episodes and access to over 200 episodes and exclusive content. Visit patreon.com/casting with Kelly Jones. Plus this year I am guiding full-time on Lough Corrib in Ireland. To book a day, visit my website, thecorrib.com. But I've yet to have a dapping rod. It is a very productive way of fishing. And it's nice to see, for instance, when you're on the island having lunch, you maybe get one or two children or even the old fellas. They come on shore with a box, looking around the walls and the bushes, picking up the mayfly, It's a nice thing to experience.
We stayed with a lady there in Ochterard, and she said to us, well, you can get mayfly. They sell them down at the hotel in Ochterard in the mornings, about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and there'll be kids there selling them. I thought, that's quite interesting. Let me dash down in one in a car. And I was shocked to see about 20 kids, all ages, standing outside this hotel. It looks like ferret boxes, but they were boxes with flies in them, and they would sell them to you there and then. And they were allowed to go to school 2 hours late each day, during the mayfly season, which was fantastic when you think about it.
Yeah. I've heard stories of them saying years ago they'd have a week or two off from school just to do it,
Oh,
I don't know if that happened.
Yeah, they're off for at least 2 weeks, depending on the mayfly season goes. Now, we then got friendly with one of the boys then, he was a good Gaelic footballer, hurler, little boy Malloy, and we'd pass his house in the morning, and I see a sign out saying mayflies for sale. Homemade sign, but the kid would have done big sign, like slow down road ahead or something. Call in there, and we said to him, we do a deal with you. Look, if you can get us flies every day, we'll take them. So he didn't have to go down to the hotel. He could sell them to us on the side of the road. And then I noticed the year we went back, there's 2 young schoolgirls in school uniform with a big sign. So one side of the road, this young boy, and then a mile down the road, another sign. And they were just on the country roads going into the town. And you'd see cars pull up, buying the flies. And because the wonderful thing about the mayfly, when you get out there, you can catch a few as you drift along. But when you put them on the hook and you get it right, you obviously need a breeze because the floss line will lift and the fly will dance naturally, but you don't want to get the line wet because it doesn't go so much. But I can remember the one day I caught a fish about 3.5 pounds. But because the water's so clear, and you know all about this, Kerry, because you're over there. You can see boulders down there, and you can see. But this fish came vertically, head first, up from the bottom. He must be coming through 10 foot of water, which I could see, realize it was a good fish because you get a bit panicky if you see a big fish. It came up and it took the mayfly on the top and came out of the water and back in. And I thought, and we were told, don't strike straight away, give it time to turn around. I didn't have time to do anything. We brought the fish in, photographed it. They're the most glorious spotted fish I've ever seen, and released it and decided then, let's go and make a cup of tea in the Kelly kettle. And normally the first fish we catch out there, not sacred really to say this, but we would take it in the frying pan and cook it up. And the skin would be crispy, black, and then the flesh is bright orange. I've never seen trout like it.
That's right, yeah. That's the only time I eat fish, to be honest. I'm not a fish lover. But once a year, I'll do exactly that. Usually the first reasonable fish I have of the season, I will kill it and then have it for lunch on the island then. More of a tradition thing. And they do taste a lot better then as well. Well, next time you're over, if you think of coming over, you'll have to let me know and bring your dapping rod with you.
I will. I won't give you a lesson in it, but I'll let you use it. You can see, because most of the guys there have got these telescopic rods which are long, which is ideal to carry. Mine's, 3 5-foot pieces. It's got a long thing to take in the car. No problem. But I didn't realise you were out in. I know you go to Ireland back and forth. You've now moved, have you?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I moved in.
And is it in that glorious cottage with a thatched roof?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Good God. I can't believe you've done something which I think most guys who love Ireland would love to do. I don't think it would work in my case because my good lady's from Pencoed and she doesn't want to leave Pencoed, and maybe she loves Ireland like I do, but she doesn't love it as much as I do. But you've gone and done the dream, haven't you?
Funny enough, I saw a quote this morning and it said, you can either stay in the life you got or go for the life you want. And, the decision will be the one that scares you. So I thought, fuck it.
It is, yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. And the house that we used to have in Ireland, in Muff, it's just a funny old word, and there's a buff diving club. I know that because somebody sent me the T-shirt once and I can't wear it. I said, I gave it to one of my mates. Yeah. Oh, you Google, that'll come up. Well, when you go to the village, there's a pub there called the Squealing Pig. It's one of those pubs you think, if there's something going on, you go in and you feel a bit frightened because it's intimidating. all the locals are pissed up and going mad. But I mentioned it there and they didn't think it was funny. Some did, but they didn't really get to it. But but that house there, there was 2 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs. The no water, no electric, but the pump was outside and the bog was outside. And what made me smile was we used to go and get the water from the pump, and you'd do the handle for a while. It's not like a tap, pumping it.
Yeah.
Up we'd come into a white sort of bucket, and the water looked slightly like cold tea, But then if you went through the bog outside, usual nonsense, like they had up the valleys, really, wooden door with holes in it, you could see through it. But this one was by a hedge, and outside on the other side of the hedge was a bus stop. So you go in for a crap, shall we say. And I'm sat in there, and it's bloody cold, it's wood, short trousers on, what am I, 8 years of age? And there's people outside talking, hello, Mary, where are you going now? Will you be going into Lismore? And you think, I can't come out to the bog because they're there. Because they wouldn't see you because the door would open, you creep off, and they wouldn't see me behind the edge. But it was...
Well, I can't wait to get my hands on one of those T-shirts. Are you a life member of the Muff Diving Club, are you?
I am. In fact, I was president for a while. One of the things I noticed about Corrib, one of the first things I noticed when I really loved it, being out there, because being Irish myself, I like the pub situation, but this was what the Irish have done, which makes me smile. I'm out there. If it's very rough, I don't like it, I must admit. I don't want to go too far from the shore, and I don't want to go too deep. Anyway, we're out there, and it was very rough, and we're getting soaked just by the spray as we go along. And a man went past us in his boat. He was standing at the back, standing up, which I found comical, but he had like a tube coming off his handle to for the motor speed, so you could operate that like a bit of
extension arm,
drain pipe up a sink or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and at the front was his spaniel with his ears flapping like mad, just looking out the head. Probably say left a bit, right a bit. Yeah. But he went past and he shouted out, "Oh, go on there!" And I thought, "Good God!" I'm holding on to the side because I didn't want to stand up or move around hardly at all. I was thinking, "No, let's get in." It's too rough for me. But that shows.
The spaniel was probably the spaniel probably was looking for icebergs over the bow.
Correct.
You've got a new fishing partner, haven't you? Your dog? This is a new dog you've had now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I always wanted, when I was down in Carmarthen, when my dad went with the farm, there was a lady that sort of took him under her wing and sort of fed him and this sort of thing, and Auntie Maggie, and she had a wonderful small holding, and she bred a few types of dogs, Celia hams, corgis, boxers, and there was always a scruffy Jack Russell running around. And I always wanted a Jack Russell, and this one I used to take for walks on a bit of baler twine. And one day it got lost, and I came back crying, and I said to Auntie Maggie, I've lost the dog. She said, "Oh, don't worry." She said, "We'll go and find it." So she went with me through a couple of fields up to the top of the wood. And she started calling in Welsh, obviously, and I was whistling a bit, and I could see the dog running towards me. Oh. And I thought, well, I'll bend down to catch it, and it hit my leg, and I thought, well, that's a bit strange. I couldn't work out what it was. But it wasn't the dog that hit my leg. It was a rabbit it was chasing, which hit my leg with my wellies, I had the short trousers on. And I carried the dog back on his baler twine and holding the rabbit. So this love of a terrier was in me. Anyway, eventually, I finished work and my wife said, "Look, I'll buy you a dog at some point." And I was in Cowbridge, a little town near it, and in the newsagent was a card saying, terrier, Jack Russell Terrier pups for sale. And it was a farm up the road, so I went up there. I didn't tell my wife I was going to look. I didn't tell her I was looking for a dog, seriously, because we hadn't really come to the decision, when will I have one? I did the fatal thing, made the phone call. Went up, seen the dogs. They came out. The chap said, "Oh, they're in here in the run." Open them up, and 5 of them come out. He said, "Oh, anyone take a fancy?" I said, "Oh, not really." I said, "To be honest," I said, "I'm not really ready for a dog yet." I said, "We're going on holidays to Italy now and next week." And he said, "Well, if you want one, I'll keep it for you." I said, "Well, which one would you like?" I was thinking, how am I going to get out of this now? Why did I do this to myself? And suddenly, one crept out from the back, and he looked a character, but a bit shy and broken coated and long legs. I didn't want a short one. I didn't want a smooth one. I wanted a hairy one. So I said, "I'd have that one." He said, "Oh, we're keeping that one." I said, "Oh, my wife fancied it." "All right, doesn't matter." I said, "Look, when I come back," I said, I'll come again, bring my wife up. She looked, said, I'll make a decision now. She said, if you want that dog, you can have it. I said, okay. I said, I'm going to have to bring my wife now. I said, I bought a dog. And he said, well, I'm going to have to ring my wife and say, she hasn't got a dog. So, yeah, I got him, called him Paddy, had him for 14 years. Poor old thing died on Christmas Eve last year, not this year. And I buried him by the river where I look after a little bit of river. And I put some daffs around there. And the daffs are up now. And nobody would know he was there other than people say, oh, have you seen those daffodils down there? They must be wild, you know. But I've got another dog now. He was a rescue dog from... he was dumped in Tesco's Port Talbot, and we call him Wilbur. We don't know how old he is. We didn't have a name, no tag, but he's a completely different dog. But I noticed that both of them are very keen on rats. Right. We've got a few rats in the garden, and they don't come in the garden anymore.
Do you take him fishing?
I have taken him fishing. Oh my God! I took him carp fishing down by the River Teifi at Cambridge, and because I wasn't sure he'd come back, I had him chipped, you know, and put him on a long piece of rope. It was like a full washing line I bought from a shop, and he stayed at the very end of that line all the time we were there. He would only come up to me if I went and picked him up. He was very, very shy. He was hiding in the garden when I first saw him. Now he's nothing like that. I still don't let him off because I don't trust him. But yeah, he's been fishing. He's been to Cambridge. He wasn't impressed. And he's been to Redmire because I look after Redmire trees and things, and part of the work up there is, I used to be a gardener, so that helps me. So yeah, he's been fishing. But dogs in fishing, you have to have a well-behaved one. I know one, so I took my other dog to a place we were fishing for rudd, and the first thing he did was tread on the hooks and maggots that went upside down, and we never had any maggots to fish. We had to go home. So, you know, it was a stony beach, and they disappeared.
That's one thing I want to plan to do in the next few months now this year is get another dog. I did have a border collie some years ago, Floss. So now I'll be, hopefully, you know, a good few months now I'll be settled here with getting the house sorted, and I'll be on my list then. It's the thought of having a collie I want at the drifting on a boat.
Well, they're intelligent dogs as well, aren't they? And very well behaved. It would be a classic dog to have with you, really. Yeah. And they're watching everything, aren't they? Because I know when I took, there's a secret pool, as you could call it, down in Devon. I'm not allowed to mention the name, I'm allowed it in publicity, but very few people get to fish it. And I took Paddy with me once, and I staked him to the ground, you know, with these shooting spiral things. And he sat there for 4 hours. I timed it, and he was just staring across the water, obviously looking at things that he could see, birds or something, but I just thought, he was fixated with it. I thought, what's he looking at? Because I couldn't see a lot over there, but that's how they are. They're in a world of their own, and they let us into their world, which is this bond with the dog. It's a wonderful bond, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
They look on you for everything: exercise, feed, love, you know. You know, the places I went with the dogs I've got have been fantastic. And just to sit down with the dog, you know, and it's very, very warm in some places, and he's panting away there, and get in the shade then, and you could both drop off to sleep, really. Yeah. I took him once to the Upper River Test, where Oliver Kite, another one of my fishing heroes, a fly fisherman, very famous for some of the flies that he used, really, you know, Upper Nymph and Pheasant Tail and Imperial. But he fished the Teifi as well at the time. But somebody said to me, oh, I know you're a fan of Oliver Kite. I've got a Facebook group about that as well. And he said, you'd like to go up and I'll show you where he died. He died at a very young age, in his 40s, while he was fishing. And so I met this gentleman, and he went on this private stretch of river. The Upper Test is only like a stream in West Wales. It splits in two, and you'd say, well, it can't be the Test, but it was the Test. And I was allowed to fish it. But as we walked along, he said, look, I'll leave you now. I'll see you later on. Meet up. I was staying there, so we stayed in the pub and that. And he said, this is the area where he died. So thanks very much for that. And I had the dog with me, Paddy, and I sat there for a minute, had a cup of tea, and just looked around. And it was an amazing thing you see it on there's videos of Oliver Kite, and you'd see where he was fishing, and that there's one that tells you, that he died on the riverbank. And it's funny. I've got not a fascination, but a couple of things have happened, which fishermen.
I didn't even know he died fishing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he died fishing. In fact, the next time I go down, the old lady that lives in the house, which is a private house, she said to me, "Oh well, I can come down with you and show you exactly where we found him, because they had to carry him up to the road to go to the ambulance, but he'd gone. They couldn't bring him back."
Wow.
But I visited Kite's grave at Fiddleton Church, which is in Wiltshire. I looked at the headstone, left a rod there, an old cane rod, which people who have marked upon since have gone to visit, only because when I went to another church in Hampshire, I actually went to pinch some mistletoe, and I got my car, Volvo Estate, under the tree, and I was standing on the roof, and the church door opened, and the man came out, and he said to me, "Can I help you?" And I said, "You're all right." I said, "I'll tell you what I'm doing." I said, "I'm down here fishing. Earlsbourne Priors is the name of the church, St. Mary's." And he said, "Oh, you've come to see the grave, have you?" I said, "Oh, no, not really." I said, "I was going to have some, well, I'll get you some of that." I said, "I've got a big pole here." He was an ex-army man. And he said, "No, the grave is of Harry Plunkett Green," he said, "who wrote Where the Bright Waters Meet." And I said, "Oh, right." He said, "Follow me and I'll show you." So,
wow.
Yeah, I followed him through the churchyard, through a lot of grass to a corner where there was a big cross there. And on the grave were 3 or 4 fly boxes, all being weather beaten and broken, and there was insects in them. But I've been back since to see this grave, and sometimes there's flies left there in new boxes and all tied by somebody who wanted to, and there's a little note saying, inspirational character. Yeah, I've done that one. Did Oliver Kites, and then, of course, my hero, Bernard Venables, I researched it, and our president, Peter Rogers, well-known man in the literary world, he said to me, "Well, Bernard is buried up at a natural burial ground." So I looked one year, couldn't find it, and I've got to go next year. And I went back, and the lady showed me to the area where there was a very large stone. It looked like a piece of, Celtic stone but she said it had to go by JCB, it was that big. And it's engraved with Bernard Venables' date, but nothing else.
Right.
And it was a wonderful moment. I went and got myself a glass of port.
I like port.
Sat on a bench nearby, and then I picked some holly, which I got out of the tree, and put it on the stone, because she cleared all the moss. I said, "Oh, do you want me to clear any more?" I said, No, it's perfect as it is. You could just, if you looked hard enough, see his name. And so that was another special moment. So there we are. Perhaps I myself will have a final resting place, which won't be so glamorous, I'm sure.
Well, you've inspired me actually to dig my books out and read the stories you used to do. Well, there's one more question I gotta ask you, and I think you know what it's gonna be. Where would you want to be to make your last cast? Well,
that is a question, and something I've never thought of. But I think we all fish in our mind from time to time, places we've been, perhaps places we haven't been, and it's somewhere you want to go. Well, I could split myself in two here, and I'd be on a chalk stream, not a manicured one, maybe like the Wiley or somewhere in Wiltshire, just fishing the dry fly. The fish are rising, and flies coming towards me. I identify the fly, as you do, and pop one on, and you wouldn't get a fish straight away, but then you get a good fish. Pop it back. That would be one half of me, but the other half of me would take me back to the Teifi, to the days I fished below the bridge on the left-hand side, opposite the flat rock, as we call it, where you stand there, the water's coloured, fining down, just trotting a worm down for a sea trout, or a suin as we call them. Plus, the bite is electric. Taking the fly is wonderful. You see everything. You don't see anything when you're worming, but you feel that bite, the bite that you felt probably as a boy when you fish with the worm. And that has never left me the excitement of that. So that's where, if I could have 2 days, a bit like Desert Island Discs, isn't it? You know, what can you take with you? I'll take the day on the chalk stream in May, and I'll take, perhaps in July, a rain-fed river like the Teifi, just looking for a good sea trout. And a good sea trout to me would be 2-3 pound. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Tony. If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to listen to more, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you'll get weekly podcasts and access to over 140 episodes, behind-the-scenes photography to go with each episode, plus other exclusive content and prizes. To become a Patreon, visit patreon.com/casting with Kerry Jones, or you can find the link on my website, castingwithkerryjones.com. That's all for now. Tight lines, and may they always be up in the wave.